This is the Bizgnus Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Comparing audio recorded on a smartphone to audio recorded in a studio is sort of like comparing a doodle to a Rembrandt. And it used to be that getting a Rembrandt-level recording with the right equipment and the right highly trained sound engineers would mean traveling to Hollywood or Nashville or some other media center. But how about Stockton? Known to the pros, but not necessarily to the public, a Hollywood-level recording studio is tucked away in an upscale neighborhood of the California's Central Valley City. Sam York is the co-owner of Studio C, and he joins us on this Bizgnus Podcast.
I joined here at the studio about 21 years ago, and the main owner, Dr. Thomas Chen, was a surgeon, but also had a passion for recording and music. And his wife is an opera singer in San Francisco. And they lived here part-time in Stockton because of his practice, and part-time in San Francisco because of her singing and being in the opera. And they started the studio back in the late 60s. Always been involved in music, always been involved in the symphony one way or another. And I think that's some of the early stuff that the doctor started recording first, was a lot of the symphony stuff. And that's what we do a lot here, is symphony recordings.
That must be very challenging to do the audio and recording for something like that.
Well, in the theater house that we normally typically before COVID record in, we have a setup that's we built into there that is just an amazing setup, and it captures the orchestra. Just, it sounds so good in there. To do the remote stuff, that is a little bit more challenging. We just did some recent stuff out outside. It was a little windy, so trying to get all that stuff to sound amazing, it's a little tougher, but it still sounds good.
What got you into this?
Myself, I've been a musician my whole life. I started playing drums when I was 3. I started professionally playing when I was 9, getting paid to do backyard parties and things like that. And I've been a musician my whole life, playing drums, piano, guitar, singing. And I was on the road touring with other bands as a tech. And I came home one holiday to here to the studio, and we had been recording here before I left on the road. And they said, "Why don't you just stay here and learn this stuff, and we'll give you a job?" So I got off the road and I decided to answer phones here for a minute and then move my way up.
So you started by answering the phones, and now can you turn your computer so our viewers can see what it is that you are now running? It's not exactly a phone switchboard, is it?
No. Although it looks like a spaceship with all that stuff.
How on earth does anybody learn how to run that stuff?
Many hours in here. Let me tell you, it was quite an experience, because from the doctor's standpoint, his work ethic of being on the clock for so many hours and having to really grind to learn your craft. I learned a great work ethic working with him. And even though it was very, it was tough, and it really stretched me, putting in 20-hour days sometimes. That's how I grew, and I grew quick that way. And also just being very hungry to learn and to be able to do this and produce what I hear in my head.
When people think of recording studios, they don't think of Stockton. Is it hard to get people to say, "Wait a minute, there's something I can do in Stockton," as opposed to driving to Los Angeles or San Francisco?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've got a good, healthy, hub of musicians and artists here. And we have in the past had a handful of bigger artists come from Los Angeles or from different places, or the Bay Area, to drive out here. But that is the case. It's tough to get people to go, "Hey, come to Little Stockton," But usually if they see what we have going on here and hear some of the stuff we're doing, it's a good selling point. And a lot of times it's so far out of the way of like what they're doing. They feel like they have no distractions to be in their way, as opposed to if they were back home in Hollywood and could just do whatever they want. Here, they're kind of trapped in a way.
Well, I would think anybody who lives in Stockton realizes they're really not trapped there. There's plenty to do and lots of places to eat, pre-COVID at least.
Yeah. No. I've always said I still live here. I love it. I always say there's pockets, there's always the spots and the bad spots. So I've got nothing bad to say about my good hometown here, but it's definitely a challenge. And especially being right next door to Sacramento, because there's a lot of good studios there, and it just, you gotta sell yourself on being a good engineer, someone that cares about people's projects and put your, good foot forward. And I always believe that, like, if you're willing to help the customer achieve whatever they want and not treat it like like a McDonald's push in and push out, then I think you're going to win all the time.
How has COVID affected your business?
I thought it was going to do a lot of, take away a lot of business, but we've actually been pretty busy. I think people got bored right away and decided they wanted to come in and do some stuff. And so I've been pretty steady this whole time through.
Like you do everything from an individual to a full symphony orchestra, and the Stockton Orchestra is not exactly small.
Yeah, we do everything, every genre, every type of music. And then not only just that, we do a lot of like restoration stuff. People bring in old recordings or old, records or tapes and reel to reels, and we transfer that. We also do video editing. We've got a whole list of things that we can offer to people in the audio field.
Former newspaper publisher Gene Bealey, who has written for BizNews and our former daily publication, the Central Valley Business Times, is a happy customer of Studio C.
I needed to find someone to do some minor editing for a Johnny Cash. The night before the famous historical concert at Folsom Prison, I was the only one who recorded the night before rehearsal. So I think I called a radio station to get a recommendation of where to go in Stockton here. So they recommended Studio C. And I was just blown away by it. It was like a Nashville studio in a doctor's home in a rather upscale area.
Studio C has survived the COVID pandemic and continues to attract new customers like Gene Bealey. So what is the company's 5-year plan? We asked Sam York.
Well, we keep on striving to bring in, more bigger names. We the more we do, the name gets out there, we network. And if we could get a few gold records on our wall, that would be amazing. But the like I said, there's a healthy clientele locally here, and it's been good because I've made a lot of good relationships with people that tend to keep coming back and like what I do and like the studio that we're in. So it's all positive.
Now, I guess this is kind of a question from somebody who really doesn't understand the industry very well, but what does make for a successful recording? Is it the artists themselves? Is it what you do on your side of the double pane of glass, or what?
I think it's a mixture of both because, ultimately you'd love to have the best talent that you can get in here. And that's always exciting to have someone come in here and be like, whoa, they're so talented, so good. Makes my job so easy. I don't have to do much at that point. But I also love the new people, and I love teaching. I love the kid that's never been in a studio before and has no idea what to expect. And I get to kind of shine the light on them. I let them have fun, but also if they really want to dig in further, I can give them the true story about what they need to do, the hard work behind it. And so when those new people come in, that's more on me to try to craft the best thing I can with what I've got. And usually I'm able to do that. And so I can hit both ends of the spectrum that way.
Now, does the doctor still take time to come in and run the control board, or does he leave that pretty much up to you?
He does. He loves doing all the symphonic recordings. So all the symphony stuff he loves to have his hands on and be part of. And then if he's like here in town and in the other room, he always has great ideas. If I'm doing a rock record or a hip hop something, it doesn't matter the genre. He just hears something, hears some ideas, and says, he's like, I think that would be good if we had some of this in there or some of that in there. And he's always kind of inspiring me to think outside the box, which I love, because he's in his 80s and he's not your typical person that you would think. All genres of music he'll dive into.
You must have a website or some way for people to get in touch with you. What is that?
Yeah, we have studiocstockton.net.
And that's all they need to do to get in touch with you guys?
Or they can give us a call. Our phone number is 209-477-5130. That's always the best, because I love to be able to speak to someone and kind of see what they're looking to do right off the bat.
Gene, we need you to dip back into your memory and tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about that recording, because it's more unusual than you have described.
Well, I got invited to go to Folsom Prison after the chief photographer on our Ventura newspaper, which was a Star Free Press newspaper in Ventura in 1968. And he called me one night and said, Gene, we've been invited to go to Folsom Prison with Johnny Cash for a concert. And to us then, it was kind of like being invited to go to a county fair concert. It was no big thing. And at that time, I was doing a lot of magazine freelancing, and Dan Pausch, the chief photographer on the paper, myself, had teamed up to do a lot of other different national magazine stories, like a story on the Ventura County DA who had 10 or 12 children, and another one for Parents Magazine on Andy Williams and so forth. So I was kind of, maybe, I guess you could say, a little bit conservative, and I asked Dan, well, who invited us? And he said, oh, I met his best friend at this New Year's Eve party, a minister here in Ventura. At that time, John was on the skids so much with his drug problems that I thought that was a little odd that his best friend was a minister. So it turned out to be Reverend Floyd Gressett, who was the minister of the Ventura Avenue Community Church. And so anyhow, that's how we got invited. And but I said, Dan, I'd kind of like to meet the minister first before we go. And he's, no problem. And so he introduced me to Reverend Gressett. And then he told me that John and June Carter were coming to Ventura to visit his parents, who lived just outside of Ventura in Casita Spring, in Oakview. Because John's home, actually, for many years, was just outside of Ventura in Casita Springs, after he sold his house in Los Angeles in the valley there that was previously owned by Johnny Carson. A lot of people don't know that little tidbit there. Anyhow, when I was told to be at the house, when I went out there, at first John and June weren't there. They had taken a walk. So the first time I saw them, they were just walking down the country road, but he looked like a movie star, straight off the big screen with a nice blue blazer. And I had grown up in the 50s listening, in my high school years, listening to some of his first big hit songs. And so I have to admit, I was a little starstruck. But I thought, how am I going to take the pictures of him? And I decided to make him look just like any uncle and asked him if he would swing his nephew. He had a nephew that was about 6 years old. And so he complied with everything I asked. He was just really everything his public image didn't show. And so I took the first pictures of him swinging his nephew in the backyard. And then I took pictures of him arm wrestling his nephew at the kitchen table. And that turned out to be my all-time favorite picture of him. And then years later, when the concert became so historic, the January calendar on the kitchen wall in the background became rather significant. It's amazing sometimes little things like that add to it when you don't even realize what you're doing. And I call it luck.
Now, your material has made it far beyond your office there. It's now part of Johnny Cash history, is it not? And also an album.
The night before the actual concert rehearsal, I used an old reel-to-reel Sony tape recorder I brought along. Now, that was revolutionary. When they were doing the rehearsal, I had the tape recorder going for research. And I never thought too much about it until many years later when I realized that nobody else had that recording the night before rehearsal. And I was able to sell that to Sony for about $5,000. And they turned it into a special album for a collector's item. Let's see if we can get it on the screen. Can you see it?
Yep. That's got it. Hold it up a little bit. There you go.
There, that's pretty good, huh? And they gave me a credit on the back. This is recorded January 12th, 1968 at the Hotel El Rancho, Sacramento, California by Gene Bealey. All tracks previously unreleased.
Well, let me ask one more question about Studio C. And you worked with their co-owner, Sam York. And you've dealt with a lot of professional people in the media over the years. Give us your impression.
Well, Sam was a godsend to me. He did exactly what I needed. And after the album came out, he turned it into a CD for me and my family so we could hear it. And what was neat about it is that they didn't remove the talking in between the songs. Like when John would chastise Statler brothers, where they were like a bunch of high school kids, John would tell them to calm down and like get back to work and so forth. And so you could tell who the leader of the band was. And I was just thrilled that Sony didn't edit out those.
You've been watching the Bizgnus Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@bizgnus.com. Thanks for watching.